I'm also 5'2", so I will stand here as well. So I felt like there was so much to talk about, and I know y'all can talk. Y'all know I can talk forever, but I'm not going to. So I kind of just talked about a little bit reiterating what he said, but also kind of what can we do as an industry as well to help in this, because it's really got to be a collaborative effort, right? I guess I have a little bit of a different perspective because I come from academia, I've worked in the industry, and I've also worked in government. So all of those things that we just heard about, all of those competencies, they're across the board. It really doesn't matter where you're going into work. So if we think about a typical job interview, and Adeline over here is going for a job interview tomorrow, or not tomorrow, but when she gets back home next week. So we were actually talking about this morning. But you basically interview, right? When you interview somebody, you're looking at their skill level, you're looking at their presentation, you might ask them some technical questions if it's that kind of role. You may ask them some what would you do if situations, right, which are always dreaded questions to have to answer. But basically, you're just wondering if the candidate is a good fit. Usually, interviews are pretty short. You then hire them, you onboard, which is basically like a follow me, learn, and then you're like, okay, have a nice day. Now go do your job, right? That's how work is, right? It doesn't matter if you're academia, industry, government, and the onboarding has gotten shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter, if y'all have not noticed, because people just don't have the time and they don't have the skills. So we just kind of sometimes throw people out there and go, okay, have a nice day, get to work. And then the thing to consider about this is this only really works well if you have highly technical, skilled people, excellent communication skills, excellent motivation, self-driven attitude, confidence, and the ability to identify your own personal success, right? It's really on you to make it work, right? I don't know about y'all, but I know the best people in the world don't have necessarily all those skills every day. So it also only works if you have a great mentor, onboarding supervisor. So if everything is perfect as life, you will have 100% retention and you will move on. This is not the case. And so we kind of have to think about this, and let's expand it a little bit more, and let's think about ways we can change this up just a little bit. Managers only spend about 9% of their time developing their direct reports. So how many of y'all have ever had direct reports? How many of y'all have spent all day, every day, leading, guiding, mentoring your direct reports? And that's if you have one, right? If you have 2, 3, 4, 10, 12, which is very realistic. Graduate students, same thing, right? You have 10 graduate students. It's really difficult to devote so much of your time to really develop them. But what more importantly that we're seeing nowadays is it's not just necessarily it's a time factor. We're also dealing with the skill set of these new leaders, right? Older generation of leaders are kind of moving on to other things. We're seeing a changeover. And so 45% of these leaders, these managers, are really lacking confidence, sometimes creativity, sometimes motivation, kind of all these things listed here, to make sure that they're teaching their direct reports, their onboards, what they need to know, right? And so it kind of is a cycle then. And that's where we kind of run into these issues and these problems from graduation into the workforce, and what do we do now? So it's really no longer about those technical skills. It's really about developing soft skills for success. And I remember a few years ago, I'm a life coach on the side, and so an employer, a poultry industry, came to me and said, hey, we have this new HR director, and I think she just really needs somebody to talk to. And I was like, okay, let's do this. So anyway, so she and I got on the phone, and I was like, what's your typical day look like? And so she said, well, I get into work, I close my door, I get on my computer, and I just start doing this, that, and the other. I'm engaging with the people. I'm talking to supervisors, I'm talking to managers, I'm talking to plant manager, I'm talking to employees, where I'm getting all my work done. And I was like, awesome, that sounds really great. When do you ever open your door? And she's like, what? Why would I do that? I'm working. Okay. I said, do me a favor. Just for 1 week, just go out, and instead of emailing all the contacts that you normally do every day, go out and actually go into their office and talk to them instead of using the email thing. And so long story short, she did this for a week, and like her whole world changed. Her whole perspective of communication changed, and the employer's perspective of her completely changed. Why? Because she was able to communicate more effectively in a face-to-face. And I know that sounds kind of crazy for old people like me in this room, but for the younger generation, and I have kids and I have graduate students and everything, but that's how communication happens, right? Send an email, send a text message. Nobody calls. Everything's voice automated if you do call, right? So everything, there's no face-to-face anymore, but that is the key of communication. If you look up the word communication in multiple dictionaries across the board, and I just challenge everybody to do this, there are more words in there, description of what communication actually is than just sending an email or sending a text message. You really have to be in front of people to be able to talk and to communicate. There's verbal and nonverbal language that goes along with communication, right? And so I think that's a huge piece of what we're missing. So developing these soft skills is part of that, and that's kind of, as you said, what we're missing nowadays. So how do these gaps really impact our industry? Well, they're all negative. They're all negative connotations to our industry. So there's lack of engagement, there's high turnover rates, which is not anything employers really want to see. It costs us a lot of money to hire people and then turn around and let them go 6 months later. Employee burnout, higher cost of employees, higher cost of training employees. There's just a lot of negative ramifications to not having these soft skills. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what are we doing to address these skill gaps, because I feel like, yes, academia has a certain, has a certain obligation to students to help teach some of this, but then employers also have to do the same thing. So if you're out there and you're getting ready to look for a job, these are some things that I think you should ask about, because these are going to be very important for you to develop the skills that you need to then succeed and then move up to become a leader. So new hires need a plan. So if you're about to get hired on a job, you really need to ask about the onboarding plan, right? What is the plan to get me started? How long is it going to take? Am I going to get a mentor? Like, all of these things are critical needs that you need to know, because people need to help you to develop your success. So onboarding plan is absolutely critical. If you have a great onboarding plan, 82% of your employees will be retained for longer than a 5-year period, okay? I don't make up these statistics. People publish them. You probably know some of these statistics as well. But so having a good onboarding plan is really, really critical. And you understanding what that onboarding plan is really important. The other thing is that culture matters. And if y'all we're all in the food industry, but if you've been involved in things outside of poultry science as well, you know food safety culture. There's books on food safety culture, right? There's a lot of, it's kind of come into a buzzword right now. But culture does matter, and we have to really take into consideration all the different generational gaps that we have, because we're dealing with the older people over here on the left side, which really started working because of basic pay, benefits, security, right, retention, commitment, right, to a job. And then we go all the way to new students coming in where they want to feel valued, right? And so we have different needs among the same workforce, and so we have to really understand what those needs are, and we have to really understand what these new hires really are looking for in a job to develop that onboarding plan. So yes, technical skills are important, but the student or whoever's the new employee coming in really has some needs that are soft skill needs based that we need to be able to then ensure that they get in their plan so that they can grow with the company and become leaders, because I can tell you that my needs are not going to be the same needs as a new hire coming in. We're looking at two totally different things. So when we talk about workplace culture, if we think about this is just some, I can't remember, I think it was Gallup or somebody that published this, but 35% of the people are really engaged and enthusiastic about where they work. 15% really don't want to be there and don't like it and kind of hate it. And 50% are middle, I'll kind of give it a little bit, but I'm closing my laptop at 5. I may open it back up at 8:30, kind of a deal, okay? So they just do the minimum to get by. So if we're all food science, poultry science people here, work in plant, work out in the field, think about this as hand washing, okay? 30 to 35% are engaged, they're washing their hands. 50% are, heck no, I'm not washing my hands, I have to go to the bathroom. 50% are, I'm gonna run my hands under the water and I'm gonna go. What do you think that does from a sustainability and food safety application in a workplace environment? Okay, if you just think about this in a hand washing perspective. Now take this into a actual what people get done productivity wise in a day, and how that's going to move the company forward, and how that's going to grow the company and be able to provide jobs and employments, bonuses, all those other things that we think about when we talk about workforce. It's not the greatest statistics in the world. So these are the ones that we really have to change. I mean, the majority of the employees are either meh about being there, or they're a little bit disengaged. And to me, that really comes back to their soft skills, their ability to communicate, their ability to get what they want, their ability to communicate what they need, and their ability to use their strengths, right? We focus so much in academia and K through 12, you're like, you really suck at math. Okay, you need to work harder at math. Well, I don't want to do math, okay? I want to do art. I don't know, I'm making something up. So we really need to focus on the strengths that people have when we put them into these jobs. So when we think about culture, it's really important to really ask questions. It's really important to give time for reflection, processing of ideas and thoughts, and really understanding that work-life harmony. I wrote a blog a few weeks ago. It's really not a balance, because if you think about work-life balance, you're always trying to balance and you're always off balance. So it's really a little bit more about a harmony association with that. So how do we turn that into success? So as we said earlier, 70% have not mastered the skills they need, and 74% say they lack professional development that really prevents them to getting up to full potential. So they may not be coming in with those skills, and then once they're in the job, they're not really developing those skills. So 2018, almost $88 billion was spent on corporate training. That means that there's a disconnect. Something is not right. Students, they're not coming in with the skills, and then they're not getting the skills when they get there. So we really have to focus on what that employee training is, and really focus on culture within that company. So culture increases net income by 765%. If they offer comprehensive training programs that really provides that leadership pathway for the students, then they have a 280% higher income. And then 80% of millennials say that's what they want to see. They want to see their own personal growth, they want to see their professional growth, they want to see their career advance, and they want to be able to be given those tools to do so. So ask yourselves, from the workplace environment, does my team have a manageable workload? Does my team have time away from work? Do they find meaning in their work? And can I invite them into this culture journey? And I think these are really important questions to ask as you develop new employees and bring them on into the workforce. So what about the other employees, the managers and leaders that we talked about? Remember that 45% of them lack the confidence to help employers today. So we have to also develop a plan for them. So we can't forget about one generation. We have to look at incoming, but we also have to look at people that are also there. So they also need a plan. So develop a training program is really what the workforce and the areas that I have focused on and the places that I have worked in industry is really developing that training program, and not just a training program, but one that is continuous and one that gives feedback and one that actually shows that it's actually improving with the feedback system from managers and employees as well. It takes a lot of commitment, a lot of time, and a lot of money to get this done, but this is where your 85% or 82% of your retention is going to come in with your employees, and they will soon be able to then move up. And as we see retirements happen, this is where we're going to see the true leaders really come out. And then execute that, right? And these are all really things that a company really has to be committed to do. Because as I said, we may not be seeing these employees come in with these soft skills, but we do have to provide an opportunity for them to develop those soft skills. If not, we're just going to keep seeing huge turnover rates over and over and over again. So the other thing that I just kind of wanted to leave you all with, and I thought this was a 20-minute talk, so mine's a little short, I'm sorry. But I just kind of want to leave you with a couple things. What is your company really doing to engage that next generation of leaders? And I just kind of wanted to go back into my academic skill set a little bit and talk about some of the things that we did. I required all of my graduate students and all of my undergraduate students, and I know it eventually became a department thing, but I required, and I know, don't anybody freak out when I say graduate students too, but I did require all of them to do internships. There's nothing wrong with a graduate student doing an internship. They can take a summer off. It is not going to kill them. It is not going to increase their time in graduate school by another year. It will not do any of that. What it will do is provide them with ability to solve problems, ability to see what it truly is that they want to do, ability to see what their true skill sets are, and ability to learn some of these soft skills. They're going to have to manage and talk to people and communicate and just really kind of understand where maybe they need to develop in certain areas of their life. So I required internships of everyone, and at least one. If we had to work with 2 graduate student internships, it may have been doubling up on some workloads during fall and spring, but I required them to do internships all the way across the board. I don't think that there's any better way to learn what you like to do and what you don't like to do, and the best way to do that is in a 3-month internship, not a job where you're there for 6 months and you're really miserable. The other thing is that I started doing some mentorship programs. So I took over a class, I forget what the name of it is, but it was a senior level class, and it was just kind of one of those capstone classes. Academics use all these big words all the time. Anyways, capstone class. And so what I did was, I was a little bit unusual with this, but grades didn't matter. Like, everybody got an A. Like, that wasn't the point of the class. You had to take the class anyway. And so what I would do is pair them up into 3 or 4 people, and then I spent a lot of time going out into industry and pairing them up with an industry partner. And they actually had to work for that company during this class and solve a problem. Food safety problem, it could have been a nutrition problem, it could have been whatever. Quality problem somebody was having. We had HR problems, we had accounting problems, we had all kinds of things that people were willing to work with these students with. So there was at least 2 people on the company side, and then we had 3 to 4 students over here. So the only way you would fail this class is if you just did not talk to the company people once a week. It was an hour meeting once a week. And really, it wasn't about the grades. I wanted them to see farther than the grades. I wanted to see them more important than the grades. Things were more important than the grades. And so it was also a continuous feedback loop. So we got feedback from the company, we got feedback from the students, and then we would, talk and discuss. And it was really helpful because they were able to not only solve problems, they were able to get confident about what they were doing. They were able to understand how some of their skill sets could be used. Skill sets that they were learning in school could be used out in the workforce. And then they had to communicate. They had to pick up the phone. They had to problem solve. They had to communicate amongst their group as well. So it was a lot of work, but at the same time, it was probably one of the most successful, fun classes I've ever done, just because it was really fun to get people out there and really get them to work with the industry in a non-internship setting, right? It's still an academic type setting, but they were really able to hone in on their communication skills. And then they would actually go back to that company. Sometimes they would actually go to the company and present their findings and their, whatever problem they were trying to solve, or they would, do a Zoom meeting or whatever. So it was just a lot of feedback communication directly with industry. And so that was quite helpful as well. And I think that a lot of the students just didn't realize what they were missing, what skills they were missing, until they had to do something and they were like, oh, I don't know how to do that. It's like my kids in writing a check. My daughter had to write a check the other day, and she's like, I don't even, Mom, where do I get a check? And I was like, okay, start from the beginning, right? And so we had to walk through that step. And so that she didn't know how to write a check until she had to write a check. Visiting K through 12, because a lot of times we forget about the K through 12, especially high school. You talked about 4-H and FFA. I know you talked about FFA. I don't know if you talked about 4-H, but either one, they're both great, right? And they're both great ways of getting that communication, getting that jump start on those soft skills. A lot of those kids already have great soft skills. They may not just be very good at, knowing what to do next to develop them. And then I'm going to throw out one other thing, but this is really Organizations for Leadership Development. If you're a student, a lot of these organizations have ways that you can develop leadership skills. So they have a year program, they might just have a webinar, they might have, a mentorship programs. And I just put Women in Meat up there. Casey was one of the original, Casey Owens over here was one of the original starting members, I guess you could call it, of that. But that's just one of them. And it's not just for women, by the way, it's open to all. But for that, I mean, they do, there's ways to develop soft skills instead of thinking strictly classroom setting, thinking strictly corporate setting. So a lot of it is you also taking responsibility to develop some of those skills as well. But a lot of these organizations can really help with the leadership development. So all of those things together, I think if we can figure out, a way to kind of work together on the academic side and the industry side to improve the internships, improve this onboarding, improve this mentorship, and really kind of helps with communication, and it's definitely going to help with motivation and excitement, because once people realize what their strengths are and that they can use those strengths to become successful, everything else will just be a piece of cake. And we're going to raise that 30 to 35% of people, quite a bit higher than that. Another thing is that students do not know how to deal with failure at all. And I see that in my K through 12 children right now. They have no idea how to handle failure. So I think we've gotten away from that, from the academic side and the corporate side. For example, I worked for a company one time we had to let somebody go, and instead of being honest with them and telling them why they were letting them go, they just gave some excuse, right? So that person could never truly really develop themselves better. By understanding what they were not good at, what they failed at, what they, just did not work out, and really showing improvement on that. So it's okay to fail, and I think we've lost sight of that. And then reasonable expectations of work environments. I was kind of laughing when you put that up there, because that was like the number one thing that I found on the mentorship course that I did, was they don't know how to solve problems. Mom, I don't know how to write a check. Okay, what would be the first thing that you would think about to do this, right? They don't know how to put things into a strategic order and help solve problems, right? And so part of that is not them not wanting to fail, but I think it's really important that we have to teach them to solve problems and to understand that failure is part of its success as well. So there's a lot of training programs out there that a lot of companies used. A lot of statistics and a lot of great information has come from both Catalyst and Alchemy, and they have a lot of great publications out there. And so if you're an employer and really want to learn about a little bit more about onboarding and learn a little bit more about how to improve those soft skills in your employees, these are two really great, I think, resources to have, and they have just a lot of published information as well. So with that, I think I'm kind of done.